Okay, so let's go straight in it. We do have Mr. Dominic Romain. He is opposition MP. Good morning, Mr. Romain.
Good morning, sir.
Welcome. All right, let's get straight in. Right, before we segue into our main discussion, the Minister of Homeland Security is... We're hearing, pardon me? All right, yeah, the opposition, the Minister of Homeland Security, Roger Alexander, is having a problem with people expressing their outrage and is trying to curtail or maybe seeking to have freedom of speech managed. That's the way I could put it, because that's the way I interpreted it. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't hear the comment of the minister in respect of that, but of course I would want to express some level of concern. You're hearing a feedback?
Yeah, a little. Well, we work on it too, but you go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. So I, of course, would want to express some concern with respect to that, because you may recall, this is not the first time that the minister would have entered into that territory some time ago, where he would have made a request to the U.S. Embassy to cancel visas for persons who are expressing their views on social media with respect to national issues, with respect to what's happening in the United States and so on. And of course, that should definitely be a cause for concern for citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, as it pertains to freedoms that we are accustomed having. Because if the government is seeking to curtail your ability to comment on what is taking place, to express your views as to how the country is being managed, then that is something to be concerned about. In fact, with this state of emergency, we currently have a lady who was detained using one of these detention orders simply because she would have expressed some views as to the actions of the Prime Minister. And she has been detained since November of last year and remains so. And that detention is supposed to come to an end on the 31st of this month. But she would have been deprived the opportunity to spend Christmas with her family for the first time, to ring in the New Year with her family and without recourse. So I am definitely concerned about that, and I think that the citizens should also be afforded an opportunity to express their views as it pertains to that.
And before we get into the whole question of the increase in fines for road users and so on, the whole question of the bill being shut down or was not supported by the independent senators. But let's deal with that whole issue. Given that the SOE will be over Saturday or Friday, somewhere there. And this new, this introduction of the SOZO, as we call it, given that they referred to Jamaica as an example of the success of that. But this imposition, given that you would label certain communities to be hotspots, how, there are those who are thanking the lucky stars, given that we can't trust the police, and the demand for cameras so that we can monitor to see what these police, or the conduct of the police, given that you don't want them to abuse the authority. Given that this was shut down, are we breathing a sigh of relief this morning from your standpoint, or is it that we are going to reap the whirlwind?
Well, I think we are, in fact, breathing a sigh of relief, because we in the opposition would have expressed our concerns with the legislation, both in the lower house and in the upper house. We would have proffered amendments, which we felt, if the government had taken it on board, would have made the legislation a little more palatable. Of course, we would have seen, those of us who would have viewed the debates, is that the Attorney General, in fact, when the bill was being debated in the Senate, would have agreed that the amendments would be useful, but unfortunately, he was not willing to take any on board because there were certain time constraints. Because had they taken those amendments on board, the bill would then have to come back to the lower house for ratification of those amendments. And the government found itself up a gum tree, so to speak, with the deadline fastly approaching with respect to the coming to an end of the state of emergency on the 31st. And as we know, there are a lot of citizens who, over the last few months, have been expressing anxiety for this state of emergency to come to an end, for them to engage in protest. And perhaps the government was trying to forestall that. But there were concerns with respect to the Prime Minister having this, what seemingly is unfettered power to be able to declare any area a zone of special operation and what that would entail. We saw this recent shooting with these two young people, unfortunately, and the circumstances surrounding that, which is of great concern to the citizenry. And off the bat, the commissioner of police would have come out in defense of his officers, would have given a narrative which the video that we have that has now been circulating and has gone viral contradicts. So we are, of course, concerned about that. In the budget debate, we would have raised the issue of body cameras for the police officers. And the Minister of Homeland Security would have made the point that certain other equipment gives precedence to body cameras. Citizens have over the years expressed concern with how police officers treat with them, the claims of being set up and so on. So really and truly, I think we are in fact breathing a sigh of relief. And if the government was really serious about implementing this legislation for the best interest of the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago, I think that they would have taken the amendments on board. And forget about time constraints. 2 or 3 days is after the coming to an end of the state of emergency would not have made a difference. In fact, we have a sitting on Friday, tomorrow, so that they could have brought the amendments to the Parliament tomorrow for us to see with it. So definitely we are breathing a sigh of relief.
Mr. Romain, so you described our shifting to now, well, one of the popular amendment change or bills that is before us, and that has to do with the one that is affecting motorists and road users. And you have described the amendment bill for motorists or traffic fines and so on as unrealistic. What exactly do you believe the government is getting wrong in terms of treating with how motorists adapt or navigate these times that we're living in? Because I mean, the government is arguing that there needs to be a certain level of safety on the nation's roadway, which is not really argued. You can't really debate that, but let me hear from you.
Yes. So in the debate, the government would have made heavy weather about this development being one to treat with the issue of safety on the road and about saving lives. But for us, when we look at the increase in the fines, in most cases it's some 100% increase. One really has to believe that this is more of a revenue generation initiative rather than saving lives. Because you would recall that the People's National Movement, the last administration, did have a demerit point system in place. And that really and truly was intended to treat with repeat offenders, persons who have shown that they have no regard for road traffic regulations and who break the law with impunity. And so, under the demerit point system, which the United National Congress, now the government, would have challenged and would have opposed as being draconian and wicked, in order for you to lose your license, you would really have had to be a repeat offender. Because if you would have gotten demerit points, it would only stay on your record for 2 years, and provided, of course, that you didn't find yourself in a situation where you would have gotten sufficient points to have your license suspended. Those points would have dropped off and you would have been in good order. But persons who would have found themselves in a situation where they would have accrued sufficient demerit points to lose their license, even then, you were not without recourse, because you would have received a letter asking you to come in and to explain or to write to the authorities and explain why it is your license should not be suspended, and they would give you the opportunity to be able to treat for that. From that perspective, UNC said it was wicked. They complained that it was double jeopardy because you were required to pay a fine and you would also accrue demerit points as well. And so they would have gotten rid of that law as they came into office. In fact, but they would have kept it for 6 offenses. So it shows that they would have recognized that there was merit in that particular system. Now, when we look at the increase in the fines, 96 offenses, the fines have been increased, most of them 100%. But this amendment that the government would have come with would have only taken into consideration 18 offenses. So where you would, for which warnings would apply. And I personally would have found that to be really an attempt at putting a plaster on a sore. So I'll give you an example of one offense that should really have found itself in that amendment. So failure to carry a driving permit. So if it is you found yourself in a roadblock, let's say, and you don't have your driver's permit on you, you would be liable to pay a fine of some $1,500, up from $750. And I would have given an example recently where I went to the bank. They required my driver's license, which I presented. Unfortunately, the teller didn't give it back to me, and I didn't realize that. And some 45 minutes after I would have left the bank, I would have gotten a call from the teller informing me that my license is still at the bank. But of course, then I was already on my way home in traffic. So it would not have been feasible for me to turn around, because even if I did, by the time I would have gotten back to the bank, it would have been closed. Now, had I found myself in a situation with a roadblock, I would have received a fine for some $1,500 for something really and truly that I didn't have much control over. And I'm saying that in those circumstances, perhaps that is one of the offenses that could have been included under this amendment, but it was not. And while the government is of the view that by increasing fines, that is going to increase the likelihood that persons are going to comply, I can tell you that is not very likely to happen. I continue to see persons breaching certain traffic laws, notwithstanding the fact that these new fines are in place. And a lot of persons have indicated, persons who have in fact received fines are saying that when they look at the date on which they would be able to go to court to challenge these fines, they're getting dates as far as 2030, 2031, 2032. So that if a person gets a ticket and let's say they don't have the money at the time to be able to pay, what they may simply do is to say, well, I'll just wait until 2030, 21, 32. I may have the money to pay it then, or if not, I will go to court and challenge it. And we know what the norm is. The likelihood is that the police officer who would have issued the ticket may not come to court. You go to court 2 to 3 times, and then the magistrate will eventually throw out the matter, and the person would have gotten off scot-free. So how does that help the situation? Now, during the course of the election campaign, the Prime Minister would have identified that the fines then, which were lower than what they have it at now, were oppressive. They were draconian, and she promised that she would reduce those fines and that they would introduce a training program to be able to sensitize the public as to, and educate the public with respect to road traffic safety. That was not done. And if the government, again, was truly serious about road safety, what they would have done would have provided the citizens with a moratorium period. We are saying possibly about 3 months, and in that time, introduce this education system that you all promised. Because a lot of people break traffic laws because they don't know what the laws are. The average citizen is not going to take up a copy of the law and sit down and read it. And that is the problem. So the government needs to take a proactive approach with respect to re-educating citizens, because a lot of people, the last time they would have familiarized themselves with road traffic laws would have been when they would have taken their regulations. And thereafter, people tend to break the law because they believe they know the law. That is why a lot of people tend to challenge the tickets. We recently saw where last year, August, where the government would have rewarded some 5 police officers for issuing almost 5,000 traffic offenses, tickets for 5,000 traffic offenses in the space of 6 months, and they were rewarded. So what message does that send to other police officers? If you issue tickets, that you are going to be rewarded. And the Prime Minister herself as well would have also claimed recently that police officers are wicked, that there are some officers outside there who are penalizing persons unnecessarily, and that is what would have led to the decision to come with this amendment to provide a warning. Okay. But police discretion isn't anything new. Officers, even before this law came into effect, have the opportunity, if they wish to, if they pull over a motorist, to provide you with a warning, to exercise discretion, and tell you, well, this is the law, but please be a little more careful. So to codify this really and truly wasn't necessary,
Mr. Romain,
from my perspective.
And thank you for that feedback there. You also warn that persons may engage in fraudulent activities because of these higher fines. Can you elaborate exactly how that will be done?
Yes, so I am in the insurance field, and I can tell you what I have seen within recent times is that a lot of persons, especially with the increase in these fines, as their vehicle insurance is coming up for renewal, are opting to switch from fully comprehensive, a lot of them, to third-party coverage, which of course provides limited coverage. It's just for if you do damage to somebody else's vehicle or property, the insurance would cover that, but not your vehicle. And I was making the point that a lot of the persons who find themselves on the roads without insurance, it is not necessarily because they want to break the law. persons may not be able to afford to pay the insurance because, as you may know, vehicle insurance is an annual premium. You don't have the option to pay on a monthly basis. So what we are likely to see going forward is that as persons are seeking to avoid having to pay these heavy fines, because if you can't afford vehicle insurance, how are you going to pay a fine that might be twice or three times what your premium is going to be? So we are likely to see a rise in the issuance of fraudulent insurance certificates, which is not something that is not unfamiliar to the population at this time. So, and you have in some cases legitimate insurance agents, not the companies, persons that are acting as agents on behalf of some of these insurance carriers, who are themselves issuing these fraudulent statements. So someone might come to them and say, well, I can only afford 500, and they might issue you this certificate. And we have seen videos of persons who would have received tickets for having invalid insurance, but then they show you a copy or a picture of the certificate where it is in fact valid. So it suggests that the police officers are not doing their due diligence with respect to scrutinizing these documents. So if that is the case and it is happening now, then it is not unlikely that you would find a situation where persons would have these fraudulent certificates and they may be able to pull one over the police officers if they are not doing their due diligence with respect to scrutiny. And that is a concern that I have, because I have had clients who have found themselves in a situation, they were involved in an accident, and when they would have received from the offending driver a picture of the insurance certificate, and then when they seek to make a claim, only to find out that the certificate was fraudulent. And so we're likely to see a rise in that with persons who are seeking to comply to avoid having to pay these fines and are hoping that the police officers simply will just pay a cursory glance to the documents and they may be able to escape.
All right, so the fines are increased by 100%.
Yes.
And your colleague, somebody asked for more time. I can't remember who. With more time, but I mean, and some of them are ridiculous, really.
Yes.
And just to speak to that insurance issue, you said you're in the belly of it because you're an agent, insurance.
Yes.
Yes. And you
Yes.
said that there is the fraudulent activities in insurance certificate, whatever. Who is peddling that type of activity? And if the insurance companies, given what you're saying, being that you're in the belly of the beast, are aware of fraudulent activities in the insurance industry, that because an ordinary fella can't stay home by and get one of the, let's say, I don't want to call any company name, jacket to put that certificate in. If he has manufactured that on his own, there has to be some way to find out where this corruption in insurance is going. And that could draw out a whole other kind of conversation. But anyhow, let's speak to that. How is that possible? That those activities of fraudulent insurance certificate are being peddled? How is that possible, Mr. Romain?
Right. So as I said, that you have independent agents that act on behalf of these insurance carriers. So they don't necessarily work for the insurance company per se, but they may have a contract to serve as an agent, and they go out and they solicit business, and they would have the capacity to be able to issue these certificates on behalf of the insurance carrier. And so some of them, and this is what I'm aware of, persons would come to them and they would of course have the necessary stamps and the documents that are required to produce these certificates, but really and truly it's not authentic, right? But it looks so, because once it is that they see an inked stamp, or the police officer sees an ink stamp on this document, they assume that it may necessarily be authentic, but it is not. It is just a piece of paper that was generated. And once it comes to the attention of the insurance carrier, of course they would seek to end that contractual arrangement with that particular agency. But the companies will only be aware in those circumstances where if an accident takes place and the fraudulent certificate is presented, or if it is that the person happens to be pulled over in a traffic stop and the police do their due diligence and they make their checks and they come to realize that the certificates are fraudulent, and it would be brought to the attention of the insurance carrier so that they can treat with it on their end.
All right, so these fines are out there. Obviously, people have to conform. It also,
Yes.
well, right, so it's a form of collecting taxes. However, it's way up 100%. What the opposition has taken a position, obviously, not in support of. However, it has to, well, it ruled out immediately as this month is closed. Oh, well, it started already. But there was someone calling for more time. Not sure who it is, but I think it's on the opposition side. Will more time help in any way? Or are you satisfied that if more time is given, then more people will be able to conform to what the regulation requires?
Yes. So I know one of the persons who would have called for more time was Independent Senator Desiree Murray, who would have indicated, well, with respect to issues, persons may receive a ticket for a defective vehicle, something with a light or something of the sort. And she was making the point that if this person at the point in time may not have the money to facilitate the treatment with this issue within the 3 to 7 day period, it may be the middle of the month, and perhaps you should consider giving a little more time, maybe 30 days or so, to allow for this person to get paid, to receive their salary, to address the situation. And the Attorney General's response was that the Minister of Transport is not minded to take into consideration the exigencies of life. He said life happens and we are not going to formulate policy simply to facilitate persons whose financial circumstance may not be where it should be. What we were saying is that with respect to issues persons may have with their vehicles, that the inspection, for instance, that there should have been a period of possibly 3 months. You inform the population that we are going to have these increased fines and they're going to take effect from, let's say, the 1st of April. So you have 3 months to get your house in order. If at the end of that 3 months you find that you have not done what you're supposed to do, then okay, we would be willing to accept that you get your ticket, you put yourself in that situation because 3 months is sufficient. Now you have a situation where persons have to rush to find the money, have to take time off of work to go and line up at the licensing offices, to go and line up at these inspection stations, hoping to get their affairs in order. Then you go to the inspection station, there may be issues with your vehicle that you were not aware of. So you may think, well, okay, everything is in order, and you go to the inspection station and they give you a grocery list of issues that need to be fixed. You must now go and find the money to be able to fix this, because if you're caught on the road, you're going to get this fine. And again, we're saying, give a grace period of perhaps 90 days for persons to get their house in order. Another issue that we would have raised as it pertains to your driver's license. The increase in fines, if you renew your license 1 day late. And the Minister of Land and Legal Affairs, in contributing to the debate recently, would have raised the issue of there was some 2,100 persons who would have come over the last couple of weeks to renew their driver's licenses. And all of the licenses were expired. And he concluded that all these people were driving with expired licenses, which is in contravention of the law. And as I had to draw out, not everybody who has a driver's license owns a vehicle. Not everybody who has a driver's license drives a car. A lot of people use their driver's license simply for the purpose of ID. Because as we know, a lot of financial institutions today require you to have 2 forms of ID, so people will have their ID card and their driver's license. Somebody might have also gotten their passport, so your license expired. You're not in a hurry to renew it because you don't have a car, you don't drive. But the government is now telling you, you need to come in and renew this license, even though you may not be using it for the purpose for which it was intended. Because if you want to avoid, whenever you come in to renew it, having to pay a late fee of $650 or $1,750 or $3,500, depending on how long your license would have expired. For us, that is totally unfair, because there is no penalty for late renewal of your ID card. There is no penalty for the late renewal of your passport. So why are you penalizing persons who may not be using the license for the purpose for which it was intended? Right. And then the minister also goes on to say, well, that this late fee was always there, so it is nothing new. But the fact of the matter is it was not being enforced. So persons didn't hurry because they told themselves, well, I could do it anytime. So again, give a grace period, even if it's 30 days with respect to that. Let persons know if your license has expired. These are what the new fees are going to be, late fees, and it will be implemented. Come in now, get your house in order, renew your license with just the fee of the $500 or the $1,000, and after that 30-day period, if it is you find yourself in this situation, well then no problem. Now we are not diametrically opposed to some of these fines, but we are saying the government needs to be reasonable. Because yes, there are persons out there who are repeat offenders and who should not be on the road. And that is what the demerit point system was intended for. For those persons who believe that they are above the law as it pertains to road safety, they should be off of the road. But there needs to be some sort of grace period for persons who may not be in a position to treat with all of these situations, now perhaps because of financial constraints, persons who have lost their jobs. We have persons who have lost jobs under CPEP, URP, who are now using their vehicles to earn a living. And when it is that you find yourself in a situation where the money you have, the choices between paying rent, buying food, sending your children to school, or having to go and fix your vehicle, understand when some people will do, they are going to take the chance. And you are going to put them in an even worse position when it is that they get this fine, they have to pay this fine now, and they still can't fix the vehicle, rather than if you had given them a grace period and they know some of the issues, give them a 3-month period so that they could take their time and be able to fix things as money comes to hand. But that is our position. And if it is the government had been willing to take these amendments on board, then of course they would have been able to get support from us.
Mr. Romain, before we close, I remember
yes,
I too would have received tickets long before these
yes.
higher fines. But one particular point you made earlier on concerning sensitizing or re-educating the public in terms of knowing certain traffic offenses and so on. And I went up a wrong way, right? Is it a wrong way? Is it correct term? Yeah, wrong way. And I say, officer, I don't know. Why supposed to know? I didn't see anything. And the officer say, your ignorance of the law has nothing to do with me. And that is an argument that the persons enforcing the law would make. Just address that clearly before we close. And also your message, as it stands right now, your message to motorists listening to us at the moment.
So, and that is where the discretion comes in. As I said before, officers do have that discretion. So in that example that you gave, I think that officer really and truly should have been a little more lenient. So to simply say, well, your ignorance of the law, if the infrastructure is not there, if there's not a sign that says that this is no entry or this is one way, then how is it your fault to know? And along those same lines, with respect to the increase in fines for if you go 1 kilometer over the speed limit, the fine could be anywhere between $2,000 to $6,000. A lot of people aren't even aware of what the speed limit might be on minor roads, for instance. So you could be driving, and I gave the example in my own constituency, Tumpuna Road, the speed limit is 35 kilometers per hour, and there is only one speed limit sign on the entirety of that road. So if you are traveling on that road for the first time, you have no idea what the speed limit is. You might be driving at 40 kilometers per hour, and you find yourself in a roadblock, speed trap. You would find yourself having to pay $2,000 for being just simply 5 kilometers over the speed limit, simply because you were not aware. So I'm saying that in those circumstances, discretion should be exercised. The government needs to put the infrastructure in place so that persons could be aware. In fact, the minister in his wrap-up of the debate in the Senate said, well, they are now in the process of treating with that infrastructure with respect to road signage and putting out flyers and other information to sensitize the population. What they should have done first, they are now doing last, and unfortunately for the citizenry, there is not opportunity for you to be able to defend yourself in that situation, really. So my admonition to and my encouragement to the motoring public out there is to be aware, sensitize yourself, right, with respect to speed limits on the major roads and even on the minor roads as well. If it is that you know that your vehicles are not in order, unfortunately, because the way that the government has chosen to treat with this, there is not too much opportunity for you to be able to fix the situation.
Okay.
And to avoid the fine, the 18 offenses that the government is providing the warning for really and truly is minor stuff. That has nothing to do with safety. And this is really, as we see it, in our view, an income generating initiative of the state. So just be aware of it.
Excellent.
All right? Whatever you could fix. And if it is you're unable to treat with it now, unfortunately, you may just have to leave your car parked up.
All right.
Until you can do so.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Romain, and of course, all the best to you.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Enjoy your carnival. Right, good, okay. They can't charge you
And
for
you
that.
too.
Right, all right.
That's correct. That's